In the Footsteps of Darwin, This Bed We Made, and Kirby and the Forgotten Land. This is Staying In.
Have you ever been to a restaurant that has its own currency?
I've been. Oh,
I mean, some Bristol shops take the Bristol pound.
The Bristol pound? What's the Bristol pound? I mean, obviously, I think the name creates itself. I think I can work out what it means.
Yeah, you put two and two together. It's basically a pound in Bristol that can only be spent in Bristol.
Wow.
Yeah. Obviously, I've been at McDonald's when they've done little things where you get like free fries for a Monopoly token, but I've never been somewhere where they have their own actual like full-on currency.
I've been to. If you ever go to the Alley Pally to watch the darts, you have to. I mean, this was about 15 years ago, so it's probably not like this now. You have to convert your money as, honoured by the Queen as it was in the time, and now the King and the Royal Bank of England.
Mm-hmm.
You have to exchange that honest to God tender for tokens, and the tokens are non-refundable, and essentially are the only way to buy anything in the Alley Pally whilst the darts are on. And but what you quickly find is like you got to buy tokens right at the start of the day, and kind of estimate how much you're going to drink, because each token is a drink, and you might as well. You got 20 quid on you, so you might as well buy however much 20 quid will get you in token wise, and they're non-refundable, so you're going to have to drink whatever you buy, and hence probably why much of the culture around drinking, especially at the Alley Pally, is so prominent. It's not, it's just because people want to get good value for money. And another place I went to, which had a similar system, but completely opposite experience, was a really nice wine place in Manchester, where again you put money onto a card, and the only way to interact with the wine is by this card. And all along the walls, they got these wine in like perspex boxes, and then you put your little credit card in. You say, "I want this much of this wine, please," and it pours out into a cup, into a glass, and then you try the wine.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. It's like living in the future.
These all sound like mega scams. Kris, have you been? So I take it you've been to a restaurant where they do this?
Yeah, well, I went to a tavern, and it was in Krakow, and yeah, so it's called the Wolf Pit Tavern, and it's a tavern that is built as a kind of a homage to the Witcher book series.
Okay.
By Andrzej Sapkowski. Apologies for pronunciation there. But you get this menu, and it is like a book. I took pictures of the menu because it felt like you're opening like an actual artifact written in this kind of like with a quill or something, and there's pictures there of the stuff. And it was saying that we have our own currency. You can either pay in zloty, the Polish zloty, or ducats. And if you want to get the ducats, you have to go and find the merchant bard in the tavern. And if you're dressed in kind of theme costume, he'll give you a reduced rate. So me and my partner were sat at the table trying to work it out, and it worked out cheaper, obviously, if you get everything in ducats. So we got this kind of money. And it was something really cool about just, obviously giving my my Visa card and getting back all this kind of like faux plastic metal coins that are like ducats, and coming back to the table and just putting them on the the table.
I want to know all about the interaction with this so-called merchant seller, please.
Correct.
Right. Now, I got really excited because I thought of like the merchant from Resident Evil 4. Sam.
That's what we were all thinking.
That's what I was envisaging. And because I walked past like a kiosk which had like, Witcher kind of little merchandise and beer on tap behind. And I go into an area where there's axe throwing and archery, which you can also pay with ducats to do. And I was like, sorry, where's Bard? Where's the merchant? And they just pointed to this person it's just a person behind the kiosk, really. So, oh, okay. So they weren't dressed, they weren't in the corner of the room in this cloak or anything like that, which is what I imagined.
Yeah.
But I got my ducats, and it's really cool because all the waiters and waitresses, they're all dressed like as elves. You know, one of them's walking around with a broadsword, you know, serving you, you know, your pint and stuff.
A broadsword?
But they've but like they're wearing Converses, so it's literally like ankle above. It's perfectly authentic. But it was just really cool, and that you felt like you were in the kind of like the Prancing Pony or from Lord of the Rings, and it was in the basements of this building in Krakow. And I walked away with some of the currency because obviously these are kind of lovely little mementos as well that you can kind of take away with you. And I like the idea that one day when I go back there, I can actually spend that, but only in this one place.
I like that.
I always imagine, like, those kinds of experiences I'd really enjoy. Like, you sit down to your table like, oh, hello, sir. Oh, yes, you've graced us with your presence here at the Jack-o'-lantern. What would you like? And you have this wonderful experience, but then something happens and you need to deal with a complaint. It's just like, sorry about this, but there's a hair in your food. Oh no! Oh my! Oh Swivins! Let's deal. No, I just want you to. Can you just drop it? Because...
Actually, the waiter over there said something quite offensive to my partner, and I was just wondering if you could like get them over to apologise for. Oh, but it's all part of the fun.
I know that comment was authentic for the time.
Yeah, yeah. Oh dear. Talking about eating lots and lots and lots, I've been playing Kirby and the Forgotten Land.
That is a mouthful.
So, have you? I don't think we've ever talked about Kirby on this podcast. Have you folks ever played a Kirby game?
I've never played a Kirby game, but everyone knows about Kirby.
Everybody knows Kirby. It's so for those not in the know, it's a small pink sphere that Nintendo came up with as a character that literally was built to prototype out and be a placeholder for the real character that would end up going into whatever game it was that they were making at the time. And this little small pink blob got named Kirby and then turned into a whole series. The series has been around since the NES and the Game Boy, and I grew up playing it on the NES. It's probably one of the best looking NES games, I would suggest. Like the pixel art on the NES version is unbelievably high quality, and it was also a fairly late release, I think. So Kirby and the Forgotten Land is the latest one on Switch, and it's supposedly the first 3D one, though there definitely was a 3D Kirby on the 64, but it's marketed as like the first truly 3D Kirby game, because we were all crying out for one, weren't we? And it came out a couple of years ago now, and it's banging. It's made by HAL Laboratory, which is the people who made Kirby. They've worked on some other pretty big games as well in the past. You might be aware of the arcade to NES port of Defender 2. You might remember Golf on the NES, but really the one that you probably will remember is Earthbound, the Mother series, or maybe a bunch of the Picross games that they worked on. And those games are obviously absolutely beloved. But yeah, Kirby is an amazing little guy.
So this is the Kirby game where, if I remember rightly, the big advertisement peg for it was, so Kirby is known for his prestigious mouth, and the fact, Kirby's power tended to be that he'd suck up an enemy and then gain that enemy's power or ability, and that's how you would solve puzzles.
Correct.
But the marketing around Kirby, this one, Kirby in the Forgotten Land, that one, was that you'd suck up anything. You can suck up cars and vending machines, and you kind of take on the shape of that thing, like an undigested egg inside a snake's neck.
Sort of.
Okay.
Sort of. So the marketing for this one was really odd. So if you remember, the first trailer that came out for it showed an abandoned cityscape that kind of looks like New York City, but has been overgrown by weeds, and it's almost as if nature is retaking an urban environment. And Kirby, there are no human beings around, and Kirby is wandering around this space. And when we saw it, when it was revealed, I think it was at E3 or it might have been a Nintendo Direct. When we saw it for the first time, it was like, wow, this is like a huge departure, because Kirby is usually seen in really pastel environments. There was a really great Wii game in which everything was made out of like cross stitch and fabric and things along those lines. In the very least, it's always bright and bold and stuff like that. And in this one, it was like abandoned apocalyptic environment. Very, very strange. The other thing is, as you said, and that was odd, and that theme actually continues throughout the whole thing. So that marketing did good. Like, it is about an abandoned world to some degree, and how Kirby has come from his planet of Popstar to whatever this other planet is that's very, very different to the one that Kirby normally inhabits. And obviously, I guess that kind of ties in nicely with the fact that this is the first big 3D adventure, right? It's like out of his comfort zone. The other thing with this is that, as you say, it was about a lot of the marketing around it was like, oh look, Kirby swallowed a car and now he's driving around as a car. So there are still very specific things that you can absorb. And it's called the absorb thing. I think there's one called it's called like Big Gulp or Big Mouth or something like that, for when you suck up something that's absolutely gigantic, like a car or a vending machine, like you talk about. But they're very specific. So they're kind of like, you know, when you play a Nintendo game and there's a superstar in that gives you invincibility or something along those lines. And in a Mario game, it's like they've very specifically set out a thing where if you run full pelt, you can just do this whole thing with 1 star, and it's like a bit of a challenge. It's kind of the same thing with this, in that, yes, you can get into it, you can absorb and become a car, but you've got very specific things that you're going to be doing in that, and the game is very much tailored around that. You can't absorb absolutely everything, to the point that actually the first, I would say, hour of the game, I was wandering around trying to find other things that, like, maybe I can interact with. Oh, no, I can't interact with that. Like, oh, there's a car over here. Oh, I can't actually interact with that specific kind of car. I can only interact with this specific set of car, this specific car, or this set of stairs, or this weird circle, like, frame thing that allows me to turn into essentially a kind of like hairdryer of sorts. Anyway, there's some really fun ones to discover, and they are really fun, but they are, there's maybe a dozen, if that, of these different things that you can actually have. So the core of it really is still finding enemies, absorbing their powers, doing new things. And you've got the old classics, so there's ones that like spout out fire, and when Kirby absorbs them, you can shoot out a bunch of fire from your mouth. And that's kind of standard for the series. What's fairly new to this one is you can upgrade those abilities. So Kirby puts a new hat on, basically, when he gets a new ability. So when he gets a sword, he puts on like what looks like a Link hat, right? And so he's got a little sword, and it looks like a sort of poor cosplay of Link from Legend of Zelda. But you can then return to the Waddle Dee town, which is kind of this hub world, and you can go to a specific Waddle Dee shop, which are these little red guys who are kind of classic enemies from Kirby, who have kind of turned into like good guys now. And you can upgrade these powers. So that fire thing at one level does one thing, and then you can upgrade it a couple of times as well. You have to find enough money to do that, but you also have to find these little scrolls that do that. And you find those things by completing challenges or by exploring different parts of the world and finding of these different levels and getting into places that are harder to reach, and that will reward you with this new thing. the actual like platforming itself is great. Like it's the same level of not super difficult but not super easy platforming that Kirby, I think, kind of has become synonymous with, in that it's a game that is going to challenge you. It's going to challenge you, but it's not going to beat you over the head. I think I died maybe twice throughout the whole thing, and I finished it the other day.
The question I wanted to ask is, a lot of these kind of classic games are defined by the fact that they are in 2 dimensions. They're, you know, that side-scrolling experience. What is gained and what is lost by this shift in Kirby into a 3rd dimension?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Like, I've been thinking about that myself, and I'm not really sure I know. I think you lose a little bit of the vertical movement, because the Kirby games, one of the powers that Kirby has is that he can essentially like suck in air and then float indefinitely. And you can still do this in this one, but because it's 3D, the designers have had to limit the amount you can fly and how high you can go. And so it changes the verticality of the game quite a bit, I would say, because in 2D Kirby, you can go up and down as far as you like, you know, the length and the breadth of the screen. So you kind of lose a bit of that. You lose a little bit of the speed. I think the 2D games are slightly faster, some of them, but that's okay. What you gain is there's a bit more emphasis on precision platforming, because you can't rely on that float ability anymore, which kind of made the early Kirby games quite easy in terms of the actual platforming itself. And what the game actually becomes more of is about using the abilities that the enemies have in interesting and different ways. So a good example of this would be, you can absorb this set of stairs, and the set of stairs can only angle one way, and it's just completely set. And basically you essentially have to sort of like totter as Kirby over to the area where you want the stairs to be, and place them there, and then unabsorb the stairs, which puts them in front of Kirby, and then Kirby can use the stairs to reach a higher level, for example, or an area that they couldn't previously reach. Like, that's how you use those abilities to reach new areas. Takes about 9 hours to complete, and that's the main game. And then there's a post game to that, which is just a nonsense that I was like, yeah, I'm done. But that does ramp the difficulty up slightly further and give you more challenges to get involved in. This is a really good audiobook game.
Okay.
And that's why I played it.
All right.
What were you listening to while you were playing?
Or something opposite, I hope.
Or a complete contrast?
It was definitely a complete contrast. So recently completed... yeah. So I was listening to The Satsuma Complex by Bob Mortimer.
Oh, right, yeah. That's on my wish list.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is pretty good.
Quite opposite.
Again, well, yeah. Weirdly, I feel like The Satsuma Complex is probably a really good pairing with Kirby and the Forgotten Land.
I was going to say, yeah.
Both whimsical.
Both slightly whimsical. Both got bits of humour and slight silliness, bits of darkness in them, I would say, as well. And also, and here's the kicker, both better than fine, probably good, like good game, good book, not amazing, like not shockingly, oh my goodness, you've got to drop everything and play and read this, but
that's okay. Like I sometimes feel like, you know, that you can get so wrapped up in wanting to engage with the best of the best at all times, that what you actually do is, you know, you actually lose perspective then and appreciation of what is good. I think, you know, for example, like me and Kris put ourselves through Morbius, and I genuinely think doing stuff like that every once in a while, same with books and music and video games, is really worthwhile to do, because you gain a whole new appreciation for what is good, what isn't great, and what is brilliant, and you learn so much critically about what makes those things brilliant things, because you've got you suddenly get some sort of perspective, and like there is some, there is some comfort within that, and I feel like engaging, like we shouldn't be scared of engaging with stuff because it just is good, because without it we wouldn't be able to gauge or criticize or know what is excellent.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is, for me, a bit of a palate cleanser, right?
Yeah.
It's like platformers and racing games. Those are the two that are like my comfort foods. I can just like go through them like nobody's business. I can put an audiobook on. I'm like, I don't need to listen to the music for Kirby and the Forgotten Land because I've probably heard it before, because I've played a half dozen of these Kirby games before, and they're all variations on a theme. Same with driving games, right? Like, I know what this is going to be about. I don't need to hear the screeching of tires on another Mazda MX-5. So that's all good. And I agree with you. Like, this, like, I don't want to get it twisted. Like, this is a good game. Like, if you buy it, you will have fun, right?
Yeah.
But it is there's moments of brilliance. There's moments where you go, oh, that's Nintendo. That's the Nintendo seal of approval right there, right? And then the rest of it is like, this is a very good platformer. This is a very good platformer. It never hits that high of Super Mario Wonder. But I just don't know what does now. But it also kind of doesn't need to. And it's lovely and sweet, and it tries to tell a story, bless it, and flubs it, which is, again, as somebody who makes games, it's wonderful to see Nintendo just flubbing story like over and over again with its character mascot platformers. It's good to see, and it's also good to just see how Laboratory may continue to support a character and a franchise that people absolutely love with another really good. They could have played it safe. They could have made another 2D one, right? They could have done an Epic Yarn 2. They could have done that, but they didn't. They did a 3D action game, and they nailed it.
Right. Are you ready for my brilliant question?
Go for it.
Yes.
Brilliant question. Here we go. In the year 2023, okay, cast your minds back. I don't know what you were doing, but how many games about Charles Darwin or related to Charles Darwin, how many board games were released? So how many board games either about or related to Charles Darwin were released in the year 2023?
I want to say I know somebody who published one. I think it was called Exploriana.
Okay.
I think that came out in 2023. It might be in 2022. But other than that, it must be like, it's got to be at least, it's got to be maybe two?
Good.
Maybe two in 2023.
I'm going to go with 3.
Kris, you're absolutely spot on with 3.
Wow.
There may have been more. All I've searched for is Darwin on BGG, and it's just thrown up
Right,
3
okay,
of them.
brilliant. So again, this is why people come to us for the journalism, isn't it, really?
So in 2023, there was the Darwin Awards party game. There was Darwin's Journey.
Okay.
And then teased on the podcast last time was In the Footsteps of Darwin.
Ooh.
And I just wanted to kind of, it just like, even just putting Darwin into BGG, like, that is a rich, I mean, I know he's left a legacy, but
yeah, a small legacy, yeah, I would say.
He really has left his mark on the board gaming community in terms of being a figurehead for quite a lot of board game material.
You know what? I'm glad, because that's what he would have wanted, isn't it?
It's what he would have wanted. So we've been playing In the Footsteps of Darwin. Me and Kris played it, and I wanted to play it a little bit more with a few other play accounts, just to kind of understand it a bit more and see if it really held up to a bit more scrutiny.
And how's it evolved, Sam?
Very good. It has evolved really well. I think our judgment and assessment on it when we first played it is probably spot on. So, in the Footsteps of Darwin, and I feel like this is a really good way to couch it. So it's been nominated for the Spiel des Jahres, which is like the Game of the Year awards. The most prestigious prize in board games, held in Germany every year, and it's been nominated for the Spiel des Jahres. Now, why I think that is important is that when you're in the hobby for a little while, you understand what makes a really good Spiel des Jahres nomination. Yep. They're not always the quote unquote best games, but they are games that are doing something different and interesting and engaging that is going to draw people into the hobby or bring families specifically around the table, which is why whenever anyone is getting into the hobby, I always suggest that they start with Spiel des Jahres games, because I feel like the ones that win and do really well always have that little bit of something that's going to get people around the table and it's going to be a conversation starter. They are not always the 10 out of 10 classics, but the reason why they win the awards is that they specialize in getting people together around the table, and that is quite crucial. So I think In the Footsteps of Darwin is a worthy nominee and probably a worthy winner, really, in that regard. And I think me and you, Kris, when we were playing it and when I played it subsequent times, like, it's just really interesting that, you know, this like man on his beagle, like,
not the dog,
makes not riding his dog, riding his ship around the world. Like, it makes such a compelling experience.
I mean, the side note for me, picking up on a point you mentioned beforehand about the saturation of Darwin games, is that I accidentally taught myself the rules for a different Darwin game prior to playing this with you, a much harder and crunchier Darwin game.
Yes.
So I was very happy when I turned up and realised that we were playing In the Footsteps of Darwin.
Yes.
We were talking about this, Sam. There's been this kind of great push recently where we've got lots of games that, rather than putting in every type of mechanic and the kitchen sink into it to make it innovative just by that combination, we've got this rise of games which just does one thing.
Yeah,
it does it well.
Does it really well?
It minimizes, and it's still crunchy. There's still choices to be made, but it's all about one thing, really, and it distills that thing in a very light. I mean, how long is a typical playtime of Darwin's? In the Footsteps of Darwin,
no longer than 30 minutes.
And sometimes you just need that.
Yeah, and surprisingly, it is probably one of the most well-rounded and captivating, like, filler games I'd probably have ever played. Like, and I think that, like, it, like, filler sometimes is damning a game with faint praise, but, you know, I think a really good one makes or breaks a board game evening. And In the Footsteps of Darwin, when you finish playing it, you feel like you've been, you know, again, this feels like it's damning it with faint praise. You feel like you've been through the ringer of a really strong Euro for hours, but actually you played a nice light and breezy 20-minute board game, and you're getting the same level of satisfaction out of that experience. So how the game works is, the first thing you do, which is really, really delightful, is you hand someone their own personal folio. So everyone gets their own personal little book, a bit of card folded in half with lovely little art on the outside, nicely coloured and patterned to look like a leather-bound folio essentially, and everyone gets to pick one. They'll open that up and it'll have lots of blank squares in it. Each square relates to a particular location and a particular genus of animal, so like a mammal or insect or a bird or something like that. And then in front of you, in terms of what's shared amongst all of the players, you have a grid of 9 different animals, all hailing from around the world, all different genus types, as well as some, as well as a pool of general objectives that you can obtain, some research rewards that you can also get, and some access to some helpers who will help you on your journey. And then all you do on your turn is you see where the beagle is on the board, and the beagle just sails around all these 9 tiles. You either pick the tile that's closest to the beagle, the tile that's second closest, or the tile that's furthest away from the beagle, and then you add that onto the space that shares the same criteria, so i.e. matches the same genus and matches the same location, and then you move the beagle the requisite number of spaces that equals the tile that you took. So if you took the tile that's closest to the beagle, that's 1.
Yep.
If you take the tile that's in the middle, that's 2. If you take the tile that's further away, it's 3. So you move around. And then that is the game. You carry on doing that until everyone sort of studies 12 animals. That's what you're doing. You're studying alongside Darwin on his ship, all these animals. And then it's the most points wins. Some animals give you instant points at the end of the game. Some animals contribute to things like multipliers, or they'll contribute to certain objectives that you're meeting to and with. But that is the crux of the experience. And what I sort of got wrong when I played it for the first time was that I thought, oh, you just get to fill up this little board in front of you. But no, you don't. You will never fill up the board in front of you. You will never be able to categorize all these animals and all the sort of slots that you got to fill. So you're always having to try and make the best choice in the moment, depending on where the beagle is. And I think what really makes this a superb Spiel des Jahres game, and I think one of the reasons why it's been nominated, is that it's really impossible to have any sort of strategy, because you'll never know where the beagle is going to end up on your turn. There you get some access to things that can help you sort of manipulate that and move the beagle back and forth or refresh the row or whatever. But because you never really know for certain where the beagle is going to be on your turn, you can never be 100% certain about which animals you're able to study on your go. So it's always about reacting. It's a bit like shifting stones in that way. And the reason why shifting stones is so great is because you're always just reacting. It's never really about planning. It's never really about strategizing. You're never all just sitting in silence with your head down, just wondering how the hell you're gonna make it through. You just look up. Oh, it's my turn. It's not really what I wanted, but I guess if I get that, then I could make this work. So you're always, your turn is always shaped around the immediacy of where you find yourself in that moment, and that makes it a superb family game. It makes it a superb entry-level game, and it makes it a lighter and breezier experience with some elements within it that you can sort of start to explore and start to play with, in terms of maybe meeting certain objectives, taking a few risks and rewards here and there, and really like focusing and min-maxing on one certain like score set. But really, there's no time to really, knuckle down and really explore all the strategy that the game could possibly offer, because it'll be over too soon. So you've got no choice but to have a light, fun, breezy experience with it. And that's great.
One of the things I like about, people refer to them as filler games, like one of my favorites is Ticket to Ride New York. It's like a game that takes like half an hour, right? And it's exactly that, right? It's Ticket to Ride, but smaller. Basically exactly the same mechanics, shorter play length. And I think that the thing I like about that game is that it sounds like kind of where this game is going, but the shorter play length means that you get to explore different elements of the strategy again and again and again, right?
Yeah.
And you actually get to experiment with them over time, because rather than something like again, I'll use Ticket to Ride as an example, like those games can take like 2.5 hours, like if you're playing one of the really big versions, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, and the first time you play it, you're like, okay, well, I guess I'll go over here, and I guess I'll go over here, and you don't really come up with a strategy for it. Whereas when you play something like Ticket to Ride New York, it's like, right, this time I'm going to entirely focus on making sure that I get the destination cards. Like, that's what I'm going to go with this one. And you can play multiple versions. You can focus on doing destination cards multiple games, because it only takes you 20 minutes to 30 minutes to actually get a game in. And you can see what happens when I play that kind of a strategy. And then you go, right, I'm going to change my strategy. I'm going to go more towards this other thing and to try and pick those up. It sounds to me like this is one of those games that is broad rather than deep.
It's an interesting point you make, because I think tied to that is something that is also indicative of these Spiel des Jahres games, where they're designed in such a way that you can actually like house rules it in terms of teaching.
Right.
And the example of games of this sort that I always point to is Carcassonne, who I think won the Spiel like early 2000s, where whenever I first play Carcassonne with someone, I only ever teach them scoring cities and scoring roads, and then we play a game with that. And then after that, okay, here's abbots. Okay, right, cool. Here's farmers. All right, okay, here, cool. And you can kind of add these little increments. And likewise in the Footsteps of Darwin, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, if memory serves me correct, you can stack tiles if you want to, but obviously you may not score the tile that's now covered up. So that adds a literal layer to that game. So I could easily imagine a world. It's not something that's necessary in the rules book, where you can kind of scale up within it. So yes, it does have that breadth, but you can also introduce layers of depth. Or equally also, I could play a game of In the Footsteps of Darwin where somebody's literally just thinking, okay, I'm just going to stay on one level and fill as much as I can, whereas another player might think, actually, I'm gonna just deepen the game a little bit more, and it'll still be both a balanced experience for both those different degrees of difficulty in one game, which I think says a lot. So you know, Sam likes to boast that he was an Italian chef. I was an award-nominated housekeeper at one point in my life.
This is true. This is very true.
I worked in a hotel for 2 years, where my weekend would be getting into the hotel for 6, picking up some keys, and I'd walk into the hotel and I wouldn't know what I would be greeted by, because my job would be to clean the hotel from top to bottom, then go around, prepare breakfast to serve the hotel guests, and then clean the rooms of those who have left or need their room cleaned. And it was a really lovely experience getting there early in the morning, just me and the whole of the hotel to myself. I put some podcasts on and I'd hoover and I'd clean, all that kind of stuff. But I always used to find it really interesting when you'd go into the rooms where the guests are still kind of staying in the hotel, but they're just out and they just want you to kind of just make the bed and put some fresh towels in and stuff like that. Yeah. And I always found it really interesting, because all the rooms were basically furnished exactly the same way. Some might be a bit bigger, some might be a bit smaller. But it was always fascinating to me how each respective guest tailored or feng shuied the room to their own kind of expected kind of ways of kind of staying or living. Say, for example, some of them would move the bedside table to the other side, or move it a bit closer, or repurpose it and turn it into a desk or something like that. Others would literally stash everything away because they assumed I was some kind of thief. Others would just have everything on display. And
do you just a general question to the room, do you put stuff in drawers when you're staying in a hotel room?
No.
Okay. That's fine.
I do. I've started doing that, Sam. because for a while I used to live just outside the suitcase, basically, and everything used just to go in the suitcase. But I've started to kind of expand beyond the suitcase, book on the bedside table, that sort of thing, really.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Book on the bedside table is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I'm talking about is I do know a few people, when they get into a hotel room, they fully unpack, hang up all their shirts, clothes, socks in drawers.
This will be our pants drawer. This will be our socks drawer.
Yeah. It's like, no.
You're on holiday. Live like an animal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had people like that who literally just almost felt like they'd moved in. And if I was doing my job well, I'd never see these people because I'd be in and out before they saw me. Particularly when we had weddings on, where like I was on the clock really. I had to set up all the dining area downstairs for the wedding that day, and I had to do it before the bride turned up. So all I had were the belongings of these people to kind of get a sense of who they were and trying to kind of infer these characters from them. And I was reminded of this recently because I've just completed a short game called This Bed We Made, which comes from a Montreal-based company called Lowbirth Games. It's a video game. It's a third-person mystery game. And it's one player. It's set in Montreal in 1953, and you play a hotel maid, Sophie.
No.
And whilst on their rounds, they uncover a mystery. And it's a mystery that connects some of the rooms together, and one of the rooms actually brings Sophie into the mystery themselves, really. But it's kind of got, for its relatively short playing time, it's got this really interesting dual kind of attention where you are trying to solve this mystery by essentially going through people's stuff, rummaging through it, trying to work out who they are, what brings them to this hotel, and how they connected perhaps to this other person in this other room here and why. But equally also, you're a maid and you've got a job to do. So, like, I really loved kind of cleaning the bathrooms, and making the bed is it's like Power Wash Simulator, Pete, in the sense of just doing that. And I found it a really interesting experience. It's taken over. It takes place over two floors. There is this kind of conceit of there being a blizzard outside, which is one of the reasons why there aren't that many people around. There's a few NPCs you interact with, but you don't really ever see any of the guests in the hotel. All you've got are their artifacts, their objects. And I felt this kind of strange sense of guilt of I'm basically like trying to break into people's suitcases and rummage around. And you can bring in a character that the game calls your acolyte, who will help you in terms of trying to put together the pieces of this puzzle, as it were, really. And it's a really interesting experience. I think it's a really good experience for gamers and non-gamers to play together, I think. And I think that's cemented also by the fact that the choices you make will affect the outcome of the game. I'm not just talking about who you speak to and what you say, but also what you choose to tidy and what you choose to throw away.
Okay.
What you choose to keep out there, which is really interesting. That. Yeah, it's interesting.
Are you going to play again?
Do you know what? I think I will. It stayed with me because I know for a fact, because I did this certain thing or didn't do this certain thing, I can point directly to it. This happened because I was told about that afterwards. And I think it plays to that sense of like, okay, do I want to see myself as the housekeeper, the cleaner, the maid, or do I want to play detective? And I think I chose maid over being detective.
Interesting. Because, that's cool.
I was award nominated, Sam. That's a sacred bond.
You've got to do your job.
You've got to do your job.
Good Lord.
And it's kind of, I think what is fascinating is it is one of those privileged, positions. Is it something Sherlock calls on the unseen or something like referred? It's referred to. It's like the people that are no one ever notices, like the homeless people or the cleaners or anything like that. No one pays them any attention, and they have such this, and because of that, they have such this privilege of access to information and knowledge that that really makes them sort of invaluable when it comes to like this kind of detective work. So I think that as a concept, I'm really like attracted to. How does it? Because I've recently played Tangle Tower, and I think that is an amazing detective experience, and does a lot to really help frame the mystery. And like I've never, and it's like I still think that Case of the Golden Idol and Return of the Obra Dinn are sort of the figureheads of the genre. But Tangle Tower does a incredible job of kind of helping you stay on top of all the information that you get. So even though you don't really feel like you really understand what's happening, it gives you everything you need to solve it and still feel pretty smart, even if sometimes you just like banging your head against a brick wall. So how does This Bed We Made frame its mystery and collect all its clues and put all the people together, or are you doing all that on your own and having to kind of sort of make your way through all that information independently?
It's a really interesting question. So it has a little bit of a hint system which you can press, and it'll be basically an internal monologue from Sophie saying, "Oh, I wonder. I think I've seen something like this somewhere else." And you'll get like 2 of those there. What's really great, because of this conceit, because you're the maid in this hotel room, and I didn't really entertain or appreciate this at the time because I was in maid mode. I thought, oh my gosh, the guests are going to come back at any moment now, and they don't.
Okay.
So it was irritating to some degree. Like every time I'd open a case and like a box inside it, before I left the room, I would close everything just in case the guests came back.
But I like that. I love that.
I like that.
Yeah.
Great.
It's lovely. It's lovely. It's a really lovely sensation. But you can leave everything open. And it is like an escape room in the sense that, there's puzzles where you can't physically take them from one side of the room to the other. You've got to run between them and make notes because you're trying to join the dots. And it just so happens those dots are in different rooms at this hotel. But because it's only really one floor where the mystery is, it's manageable. It's doable. You haven't got a logbook or a diary really, so to speak, that you're kind of filling up. And what makes it different to Obra Dinn, Tangle Tower, and Curse of the Golden Idol is that you know what the mystery is to start off with. It's like, well, how did this person die? Who killed them? Whereas in This Bed We Made, you just know there's a mystery here. You don't know what is at the core of this at all until the end. So that's really interesting. You're solving a mystery, but you don't know what it is that's triggered this. And the core of that mystery is really interesting. It felt more to me Gone Home-esque, really. But it's wrapped in this kind of LA Noire style of presentation, obviously through the period, but its soundtrack feels very LA Noire, very much so. And that was a joy for me to go back into because I really loved LA Noire. It's probably my favourite Rockstar game, I would say, genuinely. And it felt like going back into that mode, really. But rather than being a detective, you're a maid who has a particular penchant for detective stories. I just want to take this opportunity, gents, to thank you for your emotional support on my wedding day.
All right. That's okay.
Absolute pleasure.
That's what I just want to say. Thank you.
Kris, it was a delightful day.
It was a delightful day, in thanks to having you lot there surrounding me in the eye of the storm. It was wonderful. And,
it didn't feel that stormy or you that emotional for support, but I'll take it.
Genuinely. Like, I think I said this to you on the day. Like, it's a lot easier being the groom than it is being the best man.
Absolutely.
But it was super chilled the entire day, and we had a lot of laughs, and I think it was one of those days that will stay with me quite a lot. And
I should hope so.
Yeah, definitely. Gosh, I've just been going through the 360 camera video footage that Dan got.
I cannot wait. There is some. Yeah, I just remembered some of the stuff we did
Yeah.
Mm.
So a 360 camera, of course, for those of you who don't know, a 360 camera is a camera that it's like a super wide angle, well, an infinity angle fisheye lens, in that it picks up quite literally everything. And we actually have a video of it up on our YouTube channel, not of the recent event, but we have a 360 video up on our YouTube channel. You can find it on one of the playlists, like I think it's called like specials or something like that. And you can choose your viewing angle. So you can actually like select the area you want to look at with the 360 footage. And so that's kind of neat. And of course we knew that. So Dan, who was in charge of and let's not muck around, Kris, Dan was in charge of the 360 footage and therefore should have been the adult. Dan was in charge of the 360 footage and, to quote him, pointing it in the right direction, which I thought was hilarious. And therefore, naughty people who were perhaps thinking of it as being behind the camera, making funny pranks and noises and gestures, that will also have been captured, which somewhat puts a smudge on the crystal clear purity of such a lovely, delightful event, doesn't it? Really, Sam?
That's the thing that I loved about it. The fact that at one point when we got it, I think there was 2 points where Dan got it out, as it were. One was where you were having all your photos with your family. So there's 180 degrees of that image, which is just you surrounded by your family. Then there's the other 180 if you turn the camera around, and there's me and Pete being very inappropriate on the other side. And the same with your first dance as well. You got your first dance on the 180 plane, and then behind it you can just see me like sticking my tongue out and flicking the V's.
There's the 2 examples I had, Sam. So that's good. No, one of my favourite funniest bits of the day, other than Sam's brilliant best man speech, was the fact that both I can only apologise, Sam. I elected for both you and I to wear each wear a nice fetching pair of mustard suspenders, where every time we bent down, we'd hear this twang as the back of it would ping off the back of our trousers and flick up in the air. And I remember, I think it was while Rebecca and I were signing the document after the ceremony, I just saw Dan in absolute stitches because you'd bent down and your suspenders had pinged off the back.
It actually happened when I'd given Becca the ring to keep it secret and keep it safe, and she immediately gave it to you. Really a waste of time. And then when I sat down, that's when it pinged. I was like, oh no, what was that sound? And then it was only when you were signing the register I had to waddle over to Dan and show him my ass and say, can you put me back together, please?
And he did.
Yeah.
Fair play to him.
But thank you very much, Kris, for an amazing day. I had lots of fun. It started off with a shot that your now sister-in-law bought me, you, and your now father-in-law. And I think the shot was called something like Blue Tornado or Blue Lightning or something like that.
It's very bright.
And it was very bright, but it set the tone, I feel like, for the fun times ahead. And I don't think I've laughed as much that day as I have in a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, no, it was hilarious. I think that I will never ever forget the 4 of us. So me, you, Dan, and Pete in the back of this VW van, where a guy that we just nicknamed Jeeves brought in 4 baby Guinnesses.
Oh yes, that guy. Yeah.
And there's a cracking shot. I'd never seen this before, because when you're having shots with people, you don't really look around to see how they're doing it. You just,
no.
you're too.
You just assume that everyone's doing it exactly the same way.
But no, the documentation shows otherwise. And Sam, I've never, obviously I've spent a lot of time with all of you, but I haven't seen Sam laugh that much to such a degree, and in waves as well. It would come back to him occasionally. He'd remember
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And that was just utter joy. Same as Dan. When Dan goes, it's one of the most funniest things in the world. Because Dan has got a very, very infectious laugh, and it was a really joyful experience. And I discovered that I like baby Guinnesses, which I think was the drink of the wedding for me.
Please drink responsibly.
Friends, what are listening? You can not friends what are here. Friends, if you what are listening, there'll be at least one picture on an Instagram of that will paint me in an extremely poor light from Kris's wedding. That will definitely be on the Instagram, I would imagine. So look for that at Staying in Pod on Instagram. We're on other social channels as well. If you're on one, search for it. If we're there, we're there. If we're not, we're not. Instagram's where it's at. You can also email us, stayinginpod@gmail.com. Do you unpack in a hotel? If you do, email us. Tell us why you unpack, you rotter. Hey, this where you've listened to us, make sure that you follow us on there. Or subscribe to us, or whatever it is that Apple tells us to say to people now these days. If you're on Apple, do that thing. Follow, I think it's called. And on Spotify, I think it might be called that as well. Or Podbean, or wherever it is that you are listening to this, make sure that you follow us, just because that really helps us out. And tell a friend. Tell a friend about the podcast, please. We'd love you for it. If you're going to Essenspiel.
Oh,
we are going to Essenspiel. Well, two of us are going to Essenspiel. We're going to be there for, I think, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or at least Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be there. And if you're going to Essenspiel, let us know. Or if you're not going, but you know somebody who is, send them our way. Or if you're not going, but you know a game that's going to be there that you think would be really cool and is unreleased and is like, ooh, you're excited for it, let us know, because basically most of the big games are going to be at Essenspiel, including that Spiel de Jar that Sam and Kris were talking about earlier, in the Footsteps of Darwin. So,
and many other Darwin-based games.
Many other Darwin-based
sure.
games. Yeah. At least 4 this year, I would say, will be made. But yeah, let us know, and we'll try and get you some early view on it. As I say, stayinginpod@gmail.com. Send us an email. Let us know what you want us to take a look at, and we'll see if we can.
Yeah. There's also the pages that we've curated on Steam and BGG.
Oh yeah.
So if you're looking for the quickest way to get a recommendation, is just to look on Steam or BGG to get a list of all the video games and all the board games that we've mentioned on the show, and it will also tell you which episode those things featured on, so you can have a list and go, oh, this looks interesting, I like the look of this, and then you can listen to us gab on about it and get some info on it if you'd like. So that's always a good place to start, I think, if you're looking for any recommendations coming up. Summer holidays on the way, something to play on the plane, lounging by the beach.
Yeah, actually,
something
I've got
like
to
that.
think about that, because I've got a holiday coming up. I'm gonna have to think about what I'm gonna take with me.
Yeah, how long is your flight?
Oh, I'm off to Tenerife, so like 4 hours, I think, 3 or 4 hours.
4 hours. Yeah.
Nice.
So I'll have a think about that. I've just downloaded a game called Fatum Betula, which I've been wanting to play for a little while now, but I think it's only like an hour long, so maybe I'll give that a go. I don't know.
Okay. Sounds good.
The Spotify playlist.
Yes.
Where I'm going to have some of Samuel Desrosier's music from This Bed We Made.
Please.
On there to get that lovely 1950s kind of Canada vibe we've all been craving. And you're going to Tenerife, Pete?
I am.
All right.
Oh, are you going to? Oh gosh, you're going to go to the beach?
Yep.
It's all right, Pete. It's July. We've still got another 5 months of this.
Okay,
before
go on.
we choose another outro.
Bring it home.
So
Yep.
We'll
Yep.
see you.
See you on the beach.